But nobody acknowledged the fact that Donald Trump's old. Like, he's extremely old, and he is burgeoning on senility, and we can see that. And the fact that we just went through a president who went through that, and Scott and Kristen, they will not.
Are you really going to try this today?
They are not going to say anything without mentioning Joe Biden. Exactly. Exactly.
Come on, Bakari.
But this president is old, and that's what we're seeing. It's not unbelievable. It is. I mean, he's talking about undergarments, panties. He's talking about, it's not a weave. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing somebody's old uncle.
In today's video, Bakari Sellers absolutely humiliates Scott Jennings on CNN's State of the Union. Scott's trying to sell the idea that Trump still owns the message and the GOP is fully behind him. But Bakari's basically calling out the reality a lot of voters are feeling. When your rent is insane, groceries are up, and healthcare is draining your wallet, people don't want slogans. They want results. And Trump's biggest weakness right now is that he's not the outsider anymore. He's the guy who has to explain why things still feel expensive. So let's dive in and watch how Bakari Sellers shuts down Scott Jennings on CNN's State of the Union.
That was President Trump in North Carolina, delivering what was technically billed as an economic speech. My panel is here with me now. Scott Jennings, the tangents that we saw from the president were off of the affordability message that his team would like him to stay on.
Look, the president for a long time now has done the weave. You know, he gives these speeches, he hits different topics, you know, and the crowds like it. It's what he does. I mean, he did hit affordability messages last night, and he's going to continue to hit messages about what the Republicans are doing and his plan versus the hole the Democrats left us in. But this is the way he does his rallies, and the people like it. And so I don't think it's going to change.
Kate?
Well, I think the people are liking it less and less. The MAGA base likes it, but we see evidence that Trump is dropping with independents. He's dropping with moderates as we're looking toward a midterm election where people are concerned about costs. When you have him out there in his opportunity to say to people, I get it, and here's what I'm doing to make your life better, and you have him talking about armchairs and God knows what else, that's a missed opportunity, and I think he is going to pay a price for that.
From my perspective, the rallies, you're right. He always kind of does this weave. He sort of goes all over the place. So for me, what's more notable is this week, he did have a speech with a teleprompter. He gave an address to the country where he was talking about affordability. The problem that I think is not that he's not on the right topic, because now he's actually has shifted mostly to being on the right topic if he's talking about cost of living. My next step of advice for him would be to talk about it in the right way, which would be finding a way to acknowledge that even though he wants to champion what he thinks is a great economy, Americans aren't feeling it yet. If you have too big a disconnect on that question, it's going to turn out politically perilous for him. Acknowledge that there's a way to go. Acknowledge that people are not necessarily feeling great now. That's the only way that this affordability message is going to land with the types of voters that I think need to hear it.
I don't know. I love my panelists that are here on this holiday season, but nobody acknowledged the fact that Donald Trump's old. Like, he's extremely old, and he is burgeoning on senility, and we can see that. And the fact that we just went through a president who went through that, and Scott and Kristen, they will not.
Are you really going to try this today?
They are not going to say anything without mentioning Joe Biden. Exactly. Exactly.
Come on, Bakari.
But this president is old, and that's what we're seeing. It's not unbelievable. It is. I mean, he's talking about undergarments, panties. He's talking about, it's not a weave. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing somebody's old uncle. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Yes, the American public saw Joe Biden get old and decrepit in the White House.
Well, we didn't see it for a while. He wasn't.
What they're seeing right now is Donald Trump doing the same thing. Let's just admit, let's call it what it is.
Absolutely, he is old. I think there are questions about whether he's all there. I think that's a reasonable thing to ask, given what we've seen. But I will say, I think the big difference here politically from 2024, where he would give these rambling speeches that his base loved, is he has lost the command and control of his caucus of the Republican Party. We're seeing increasingly splits on key issues. They're divided on health care. This question of Israel is absolutely ripping the new right, as Senator Langford was calling it apart. And so, when you have lost control of your party, giving these rambling speeches that maybe leave some question as to whether you're totally in command, that is an issue that's going to keep compounding on itself.
Now, here's the reality. Independents and moderates don't vote off vibes the way a rally crowd does. They vote off whether their lives feel livable. And right now, the cost of living pain isn't abstract. Grocery prices are still elevated compared to pre-COVID levels. Rent is still brutal in most metros, and even when inflation slows, it doesn't magically rewind prices back to where they were. That's why the inflation is down line doesn't land with regular people. Their bank account doesn't feel any relief. And that's the part that helps Kate and Bakari's argument. Trump keeps trying to sell the economy is great, while the actual lived experience for voters is everything is still expensive. If you don't acknowledge that gap, you sound either clueless or dishonest. Politically, that's deadly. Also, Will's whole "it's a rally, the crowd likes it" defense misses something important. Trump isn't running for a crowd, he's running for a coalition. And the coalition that won him power in the past included a lot of lower info swing voters who weren't obsessed with him. They just wanted change. Those voters don't want tangents about random stuff when they're stressed about childcare or their utility bill. And then there's the other layer that Bakari pointed out, the age and coherence issue. This isn't just Trump being Trump. A lot of voters watched Biden visibly slow down and promised themselves they wouldn't ignore it again. So when Trump rambles or drifts into bizarre side topics, it doesn't read as entertaining to everyone, it reads as instability. And when you combine that with what Kate said about him losing control of his own party, it stops being funny and starts looking like chaos.
This may be your Christmas wish, but it is not a reality. The president is the head of the Republican Party. He's never been stronger among Republicans than he is right now. And he's always had a broad...
he's fallen a little bit back with Republicans.
Is
in
that
some
why
polls.
he spent 6 months fighting his party on the Epstein files?
You guys have been desperate for 10 years to find the moment where Donald Trump is no longer going to be accepted by the... He is the leader of the Republican Party. He is going to continue to be the leader of the Republican Party.
It used to be the case that Donald Trump's wish was their command. And it is the case that for the last 6 months, for example, they have bucked him on the Epstein files to the point where they are now releasing. Yes, because it is Bill Clinton who's really suffered for the last 6 months in terms of the shattering of his coalition and his inability to govern. Yes, absolutely, Scott.
Okay, so I want to take some time to put the Democrats in the barrel for a minute because we've now talked about Trump quite a bit. The Democratic Party, Kate, did an autopsy on why they lost in 2024. They are not going to release it to the public. How is this not a continuation of all of the reasons why the public doesn't trust the Democratic Party, thinks that they are?
This is laughable. So why put Democrats in a barrel? Because the facts are Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the
18% of Americans approve of Democrats in Congress.
Listen, Republicans control the House, the Senate.
We're an equal opportunity, by the way. It's like a television show.
You guys are down to
Okay, yes.
I'm confused with what's going on here.
You guys are down to friends, family, illegals, and health insurance executives. That's who you got right now. You need an autopsy.
Do we have the execs? No. Do we have the execs?
But look,
you're trying to pay them billions of dollars.
In all of the Washington swirl around this report, I think let's look back at post 2016, where there was a similar sense of concern. There were multiple reports. There was a congressional investigation into why the Democrats lost in 2016. There was a lot of hand-wringing about it. And the Democrats won in 2020. They ran a competitive primary. I was there on the front row. And they won, and they took back the White House. So the idea that an institutional report that is largely going to be a lot of axe grinding by individuals who felt angry about different elements of the campaign, the idea that is going to reveal to us something that we don't know about why the Democrats lost in 2024, I think is a little silly. And I think if you look back at 2017 and the way this played out, it didn't hinder the Democrats' ability to win in 2020.
What's funny about Scott trying to flex Trump's dominance here is that the facts on the ground don't really match the "he's never been stronger" storyline anymore, not because Trump suddenly became unpopular with Republicans, but because the party is starting to behave like it's preparing for life after him, whether they admit it or not. A good example is exactly what Kate was pointing at, when members of your own party repeatedly force votes you don't want, ignore your pressure campaign campaigns or quietly work around you because they're terrified of being tied to your baggage. That's not total control. That's managed chaos. Historically, when presidents have real grip over their party, they don't need to spend months publicly fighting their own side over one scandal, and they don't have to watch lawmakers go rogue just to protect their own re-election chances. That's what late-term power erosion looks like. It's not dramatic like a coup, it's slow. Lawmakers start acting like freelancers, and the Epstein angle matters politically because it's become a rare issue where the MAGA base is split between defend Trump no matter what and burn down the system. When a chunk of your loudest supporters are openly saying they don't trust your DOJ, your AG, or your messaging, that's not strength. That's a movement eating itself. Then Scott pivots to dunking on Democrats with that 18% approval line, but approval ratings for Congress are famously useless as political predictors because voters hate Congress as an institution while still re-electing their own reps at high rates. What actually matters is who are swing voters blaming when prices are high, when healthcare costs rise, when chaos dominates the headlines.
Tensions within the MAGA movement spilling out into the open. Our panel is back. Scott Jennings, this is at the Turning Point USA conference in Phoenix, and the root of this is Israel and the split inside the MAGA movement over whether it's appropriate to elevate people like Nick Fuentes the way that Tucker Carlson did. How do you understand what we're seeing play out here? I mean, because they were talking specifically about Ben Shapiro, who's been, very defensive of Israel and critical of the Nick Fuentes situation.
Yeah, well, it also had to do with Candace Owens, who Shapiro directly went after in his remarks, and her posture on the conspiracy theories that she has promoted since Charlie Kirk was murdered, which then ultimately led to her having to meet with Erica Kirk, a grieving widow who I think has put through a terrible time here. I mean, you've got a grieving widow with little kids trying to take over her husband's organization, and Candace is out here effectively trying to monetize that for her own personal self-aggrandizement, up to and including forcing a meeting. I think it's pretty crazy. I don't personally like all this infighting myself, but on the issue of Israel and on the issue of whether we're going to platform anti-Semitism or platform Holocaust deniers, I know where I am, and that is we're a political party, not a sponge, and we don't have to soak up everything that oozes in under the door.
How do you, the Candace Owens thing that you mentioned, you saw Megyn Kelly there, you saw Steve Bannon there, other figures essentially siding with Candace Owens, right, over Ben Shapiro, no? Why?
I don't know. It's somewhat complicated to me with these personalities and their interplay. I know this, platforming and absorbing hateful ideologies and conspiracy theories, especially regarding Charlie's murder, are the opposite of helpful and certainly the opposite of what I would consider to be in good taste, good form.
The challenge that an organization like Turning Point is facing is that on an issue like Israel, or really any foreign policy issue, there are massive generational divides within the Republican Party. Things that for an older generation, support of Israel were sort of taken for granted. Of course, yes, this is our position. Younger conservatives very much do not fall in line with that view. They are quite critical in many cases of Israel. And the problem is, how do you allow for a broad range of debate about what is acceptable foreign policy in the Middle East that does not wind up playing footsie with the worst of the worst and these terrible ideologies that have no place being anywhere associated with conservatism? And that's what you're seeing them hash out, is where do you draw that line?
I think what we're seeing is, respectfully, and I want to just pile on the Republican Party right now and say they're ripping each other apart, but I'm not sure most of the Republican base or most of America even cares what's happening in Phoenix with Turning Point USA. I think that the Republican base is what it is. There are issues about how we can afford X, Y, and Z. There are issues of necessary issues of whether or not we're invading Venezuela, whether or not we're going to war, what a war on drugs looks like. I don't think that many people are worried about Ben Shapiro or Candace Owens, and I think that a lot of them, I'm friends with Ben, but I think that a lot of these individuals have a false sense of self. I think that's what you're seeing right now. And I don't think that there is a pulling apart as much as it is you have these personalities like every party has that are just having, they want to rise to the top. So I don't, I wish this was something we could pounce on. I just don't find it to be that.
If you look at polling on what actually drives voter behavior, foreign policy debates and online personality drama consistently rank near the bottom unless there's a direct US war or a draft on the table. The top issues are almost always cost of living, wages, housing, and healthcare. So when a movement spends its energy litigating which podcaster is allowed on stage, it starts to feel like a party that's more interested in being a media ecosystem than a governing coalition. And here's the other part. This infighting isn't really about principles the way they're framing it. It's about audience capture. These personalities are competing for the same pool of attention, clicks, subscribers, donors, and paid memberships. Outrage is profitable, escalation is profitable, and purity tests are profitable. That's why the arguments keep getting louder and more theatrical, because the incentive structure rewards whoever goes the furthest. Bakari is also right that for most of America, the real MAGA question isn't who gets excommunicated, it's whether the movement is producing anything that makes life feel more stable. And when voters see a party that can't even unify around basic governing priorities or spends weeks fighting over conspiracy adjacent influencers, it reinforces the idea that they're not serious about solutions. So even if Scott and Kristen are correct that there are generational divides and ideological lines being drawn, Bakari's point still stands. The country's priorities are material, not performative. If the movement keeps confusing social media drama with political momentum, that's not strength. That's distraction dressed up as leadership.
Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.